I mean, we're talking about erasure, but not the kind that just happens by accident. This is the kind that's chosen, right? When people don't like what the truth says about them.
Exactly. We see it with attempts to soften, to rewrite, or to outright deny slavery in America's history. And I can't help but think about a similar kind of erasure happening right inside Black communities. The same strategy, really. Yeah, the same strategy. Remove the uncomfortable parts, keep the story that feels safe, and pretend the damage isn't still happening. And it's not just a few customs, right? It's entire ways of organizing family, of spirit, of self. It is. I mean, colonization didn't only take land and labor. It took names, languages, spiritual systems, whole ways of understanding the world. It didn't just influence us, it reshaped us. Yeah. It taught us what was acceptable, what was shameful, what beliefs were holy, and which were evil. And it pushed a strict, rigid view of gender that many of our ancestors simply didn't live by in the same way.
So, a lot of what we call traditional now, yes, a lot of what we call traditional now is actually the result of colonial pressure, of forced religion, and of survival under violence. You know, consider the Yoruba tradition, which recognized spiritual roles like the Aje or Iyalolode that held power outside a male-female binary, or the Igbo custom of allowing female husbands and male daughters who took on social and ritual responsibilities across gender lines. That's fascinating. Colonial missionaries, they labeled these practices as devil worship or disorder. They pushed European gender norms, a narrow form of Christianity that branded indigenous wisdom as sin. As scholar Oyèrónkẹ Oyěwùmí argues, the very framework of man and woman as fixed, ranked categories was not universal in pre-colonial African societies. So what got erased wasn't just a few customs. No, it wasn't just a few customs. What got erased were entire ways of organizing family, spirit, and self that made room for people we would now call queer or trans. And that's why today's reality hits so hard. We live in a world where Black trans people are being targeted, harmed, and killed, and we're still struggling to have honest conversations in our own communities about gender, sexuality, and human dignity. We act shocked by the violence, but we don't always want to confront the beliefs that create the climate for that violence. It's like a planned amnesia, you know? Exactly. In Black culture, homosexuality is still treated like a major taboo, something people whisper about, condemn, or pretend doesn't exist, especially when it shows up in their own families. And the silence, the silence at the dinner table isn't separate from the danger in the street. It's not. For instance, in 2023 alone, the Human Rights Campaign tracked over 30 violent deaths of transgender and gender nonconforming people in the U.S., and more than 3/4 of the victims were people of color.
Wow. When families have already decided that a child's identity is too shameful to acknowledge, that child walks into a world without a safety net, without the fierce protection that Black families are known for providing against outside threats. The silence at the dinner table is not separate from the danger in the street. One teaches that a life is disposable, and the other collects the receipt. Does that make sense?
It does. What makes it even harder, I think, is that nobody wants to bring it up. No. In a lot of families, it's like a kind of planned amnesia. Nobody wants to bring it up. Nobody wants to say the words out loud. And if someone does, they're treated like they're the problem for making it a thing. In my own family, the conversation has never really existed beyond disapproval. I've heard the disagreement, I've heard the "that's not okay," but not a real discussion. Not a real discussion. One where I'm allowed to speak, explain, and be heard without being labeled disrespectful. Growing up, voicing my opinion didn't count as honesty or self-respect. It was treated as disobedience, as disrespect. So I learned early that there were parts of me I wasn't allowed to defend. And the psychological toll of that. Imagine what that does to someone psychologically when the thing you're not allowed to question is the very essence of who you are. You're not arguing a random point. You're trying to be seen as fully human. You're trying to exist without having to apologize for existing. And then you become an adult, and the rules don't really change. The silence just gets more polished. People still don't want to talk about it, and you can't force anyone to listen. But the silence doesn't mean it's not shaping everything. It affects every part of the relationship until the relationship is barely there. And when people ask why there's distance, why there's no closeness, why you don't come around, it's easier for everyone to point to something else than to name the real issue. So that silence for you had real consequences. It did. For me, that silence had real consequences. It wasn't just emotional. It touched survival. It's tied to why I was homeless for so long, and why I wasn't allowed to stay with family while I was homeless. That's a hard thing to say out loud, but it's true. And it's part of why the connection between me and much of my family is still limited, outside of my relationship with my mother. The cost doesn't disappear. It just gets paid in other ways. Exactly. This is what happens when a family decides a topic is too much to face. The cost doesn't disappear. It just gets paid in other ways. When my queerness became impossible to ignore, the family rule shifted from "we don't talk about that" to "you cannot stay here while living that way." Wow. The words were never screamed. They were spoken calmly, wrapped in scripture and concern. But the meaning was absolute. Shelter was conditional on hiding who I am. I could either have a roof or I could have a self, not both. And that condition wasn't an accident. No, that condition wasn't an accident. It was the same taboo from the dinner table now enforcing a locked door, making homelessness not just a crisis, but a direct sentence handed down by people who claimed to love me, but refused to house the truth of me. And this is where the comparison matters, right? When people try to erase slavery, they're not only denying history, they're denying the lasting effects of that history. They're trying to separate today's pain from yesterday's choices. And when Black Christians refuse to acknowledge how colonization and enslavers used Christianity as a tool, both to control us and to reshape us, we end up repeating a similar denial. It's not just faith. It's also the way faith was weaponized against us and the way it was used to overwrite our origins.
So, if you're not willing to admit that the platform you give Christianity in our communities, then you're refusing the full truth. That same religious power was used to justify slavery, to keep people obedient, and to erase African spiritual memory. And some of the beliefs we hold tight today, especially the ones that produce shame, silence, and rejection, came through that same pipeline of control. We can't heal what we refuse to name. So, a different Black Christianity is possible then. A different Black Christianity is possible, one that remembers the Yoruba naming ceremonies and Igbo family structures that colonial missionaries tried to destroy, and that hears theologian Rev. Dr. Wil Gafney when she insists the Bible is full of people who do not fit a gender binary. This is not a faith that throws away Scripture, but one that takes African spiritual memory seriously enough to let it reread the text, a practice that moves from condemnation to blessing, from silence to sanctuary. If we can imagine a Christianity that survived the Middle Passage without becoming its master's religion, we can imagine a Christianity that affirms and protects LGBTQ+ kin. It's not about not believing in God. It's about being honest about what was done in God's name. Exactly. I'm not saying people can't believe in God. I'm saying we have to be honest about what was done in God's name and what that shaped in us. We have to be honest about how right and wrong got defined for us, who got to define it, and what happened to the people who didn't fit the rules. Because right now, a lot of Black, queer, and trans people are paying for a history most folks don't want to examine. And that cost, it's reflected in the data. It is. Homelessness data shows exactly what this costs. The Williams Institute reports that LGBTQ youth have a 120% higher risk of experiencing homelessness compared to their straight and cis peers. And Black LGBTQ youth are among the most overrepresented in that count. For many, the cause is not just poverty, but family rejection, a door closed because of who you love or how you identify. The math becomes personal. It becomes personal when you realize the person sleeping outside was told, choose your lifestyle or choose this house. The truth is, erasure is violence with good manners. It looks clean, it sounds calm, it hides behind words like tradition, respect, and that's just how we were raised. But the outcome is the same. People are pushed out, silenced, disowned, and left to fend for themselves, while everyone else claims they're still loving, still righteous, still innocent. So, if we're going to call out America for trying to erase slavery, we also need the courage to call out our own internal erasures. We have to stop pretending we can build strong families and strong communities on top of silence. We have to stop treating honest conversation like rebellion. Control dressed up as love is still control. Because what you wanted then and what you want now, it's not special treatment. No. It's basic recognition, to be seen as a full human being, to be allowed to speak about my life without being punished for it, to have my existence treated as something real, not something that has to be debated behind my back or dismissed with a verse. We don't get free by rewriting history, and we don't get whole by refusing to face what colonization did to our minds, our faith, our families, and our bodies. If we want healing, we have to tell the truth, all of it, even the parts that make us uncomfortable, especially those parts. And it's more than just listening. It is. When families ask, "What do you want us to do?" the answer cannot stop at listen. One concrete step is showing up materially for the life you once condemned, showing up with groceries when they are struggling, offering the guest room without a sermon attached, posting bail or showing up in court when the outside world tries to hurt them. In daily life, a healed relationship looks like a mother who stops praying for her child to change and starts praying that her child's bosses and doctors and neighbors treat them with dignity. It feels like a cousin who learns the name of your partner and uses it in casual conversation without flinching, and a dinner table where your queerness is not the unspoken asterisk on everything, but simply one ordinary fact among many.